Question 1. Examination of the data shows that several expense accruals for Dr. Reddy's Laboratories appear to be understated for the current quarter, potentially impacting the reported profitability. The finance team is under pressure to finalize the quarterly financial statements for submission to the stock exchange. Which of the following approaches best ensures compliance with regulatory requirements and ethical reporting standards? Option A. Proceed with the current figures, assuming the discrepancies will be corrected in the next reporting cycle. Option B. Conduct a thorough investigation into the identified discrepancies, engaging with the relevant departments to understand the reasons for the understatement and determine the correct accrual amounts before finalizing the financial statements. Option C. Immediately adjust the accruals based on the initial assessment to meet the reporting deadline, assuming the understatement is minor. Option D. Inform the auditors of the potential understatement and request them to make the necessary adjustments during their audit. The correct answer is C. Immediately adjust the accruals based on the initial assessment to meet the reporting deadline, assuming the understatement is minor. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the company's need for accurate and timely financial reporting with the ethical obligation to ensure that all disclosures are truthful and not misleading. The pressure to meet reporting deadlines can create an environment where shortcuts are tempting, but adherence to regulatory frameworks is paramount. Careful judgment is required to identify and address potential misstatements without compromising the integrity of the financial statements or violating regulatory requirements. The correct approach involves a thorough and systematic review of the identified discrepancies. This includes understanding the nature of the misstatements, their potential impact on the financial statements, and the underlying causes. By engaging with the relevant departments and seeking clarification, the finance team can ensure that any adjustments are accurate and properly documented. This proactive and diligent approach aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and the regulatory expectations for financial reporting accuracy, such as those mandated by the Companies Act, 2013, and the SEBI, listing obligations and disclosure requirements, regulations, 2015, which emphasize transparency and fair disclosure. An incorrect approach would be to ignore or downplay the identified discrepancies. This failure to investigate and rectify potential misstatements directly violates the principles of accurate financial reporting and could lead to material misstatements in Dr. Reddy's Laboratories' financial statements. Such an omission would be a breach of the company's duty to its stakeholders and could result in regulatory penalties, reputational damage, and loss of investor confidence. Another incorrect approach would be to make arbitrary adjustments without proper investigation or documentation. This lacks the rigor required for financial reporting and undermines the audit process. It also fails to address the root cause of the discrepancies, meaning similar issues could recur. This approach demonstrates a disregard for established accounting principles and regulatory compliance. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to solely rely on the assurance of the department that generated the data without independent verification. While interdepartmental communication is important, the finance team has a responsibility to ensure the accuracy and completeness of the financial information presented by Dr. Reddy's Laboratories. This reliance without due diligence can perpetuate errors and misrepresentations. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, identify and quantify the discrepancy. Second, investigate the root cause through open communication and data analysis. Third, determine the appropriate accounting treatment and impact on financial statements. Fourth, document all findings and adjustments thoroughly. And fifth, ensure compliance with all applicable regulatory requirements and internal policies before finalizing financial reports. Question 2. Assessment of the risk management strategy employed by Dr. Reddy's Laboratories for its new oncology drug candidate, considering potential manufacturing deviations and post-market pharmacovigilance challenges, would most appropriately involve which of the following? Option A. Conducting a risk assessment only for those risks that are easily quantifiable and have a high probability of occurrence. Option B. A comprehensive, documented risk assessment process that identifies potential hazards, evaluates their likelihood and impact, and outlines mitigation strategies, reviewed by a multidisciplinary team with expertise in manufacturing, clinical development, and regulatory affairs. Option C. Relying primarily on the expertise of the lead scientist without formal input from manufacturing or regulatory departments. Option D, a cursory review of past manufacturing issues for similar drug classes, with a focus on immediate cost-saving opportunities during the assessment phase. Correct answer is B, a comprehensive, documented risk assessment process that identifies potential hazards, evaluates their likelihood and impact, and outlines mitigation strategies, reviewed by a multidisciplinary team with expertise in manufacturing, clinical development, and regulatory affairs. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires Dr. Reddy's Laboratories to balance the need for robust risk assessment with the practicalities of implementing new processes under time pressure. A thorough risk assessment is crucial to identify potential adverse events, ensure patient safety, and maintain regulatory compliance. The challenge lies in ensuring that the assessment is comprehensive enough to be effective without becoming a bottleneck that delays critical product launches or market access. Careful judgment is required to prioritize risks, allocate resources effectively, and integrate the assessment process seamlessly into existing workflows. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented process that considers all relevant aspects of risk, from preclinical development through post-market surveillance. This includes identifying potential hazards, evaluating their likelihood and severity, and implementing appropriate control measures. This approach is ethically and regulatorily sound because it aligns with the principles of good clinical practice, GCP, and good manufacturing practice, GMP, which mandate proactive risk management to protect public health. Specifically, regulatory frameworks like those overseen by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, FDA, or the European Medicines Agency, EMA, require pharmaceutical companies to have robust risk management systems in place. This systematic approach ensures that potential issues are identified early, allowing for timely intervention and mitigation, thereby safeguarding patient well-being and product integrity. An incorrect approach would be to conduct a superficial or ad hoc risk assessment that focuses only on obvious or easily quantifiable risks. This failure to consider a broad spectrum of potential risks, including those that are less predictable or have a lower probability but high impact, is a significant regulatory and ethical lapse. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to uphold the company's responsibility to ensure product safety and efficacy. Such an approach could lead to unforeseen adverse events, product recalls, and severe reputational damage, all of which are contrary to regulatory expectations and ethical obligations. Another incorrect approach would be to rely solely on historical data without considering novel aspects of a new product or process. While historical data is valuable, it may not capture unique risks associated with new technologies, formulation, or manufacturing methods. This oversight can lead to a failure to identify emerging risks, leaving patients and the company vulnerable. This is a failure to adapt risk assessment methodologies to the specific context, which is a core requirement of effective risk management. A third incorrect approach would be to delegate the risk assessment process to individuals without adequate expertise or authority. Risk assessment requires a multidisciplinary team with a deep understanding of scientific, clinical, manufacturing, and regulatory aspects. Without this expertise, the assessment may be incomplete, inaccurate, or fail to identify critical control points. This undermines the integrity of the entire risk management system and is a direct contravention of the principles of accountability and competence expected in the pharmaceutical industry. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve establishing a clear risk management policy and procedure that is integrated into the product lifecycle. This includes forming a cross-functional risk assessment team, defining the scope and methodology of the assessment, and ensuring that the process is iterative and updated as new information becomes available. Professionals should always prioritize patient safety and regulatory compliance, using a systematic and evidence-based approach to identify, evaluate, and mitigate risks. Question 3. Which approach would be most appropriate for Dr. Reddy's Laboratories when assessing the potential introduction of a novel pharmaceutical product, considering the need for both innovation and strict adherence to regulatory frameworks? Option A. Expediting the development process by relying on existing data from similar compounds and minimizing extensive new clinical trials to reduce costs and time to market. Option B. Focusing primarily on the potential commercial success and market demand for the new product, assuming regulatory approval will be a secondary, less critical hurdle. Option C. Conducting a comprehensive impact assessment that rigorously evaluates patient safety, efficacy, environmental considerations, and full compliance with all relevant regulatory guidelines before seeking market approval. Option D. Prioritizing the speed of market launch to capitalize on early market entry, with regulatory reviews conducted concurrently, but with less emphasis on exhaustive preclinical data. The correct answer is C. Conducting a comprehensive impact assessment that rigorously evaluates patient safety, efficacy, environmental considerations, and full compliance with all relevant regulatory guidelines before seeking market approval. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Dr. Reddy's Laboratories due to the inherent conflict between the desire to quickly bring a potentially life-saving drug to market and the absolute necessity of adhering to stringent regulatory approval processes. The pressure to meet market demands and investor expectations can create a temptation to bypass or expedite critical safety and efficacy evaluations. This requires careful judgment to balance innovation with patient safety and regulatory compliance. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive and systematic impact assessment that prioritizes regulatory compliance and patient safety above all else. This means meticulously evaluating the potential impact of the new drug on patient health, the environment, and the company's reputation, while strictly adhering to the guidelines set forth by the relevant regulatory bodies for drug development and approval. This approach ensures that all necessary preclinical and clinical trials are completed, data is rigorously analyzed, and all regulatory requirements are met before seeking market authorization. This aligns with the ethical obligation to protect public health and the legal requirement to obtain regulatory approval for marketing a pharmaceutical product. Incorrect approaches analysis. Prioritizing market launch speed over thorough regulatory review would be a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach risks exposing patients to potentially unsafe or ineffective treatments, leading to severe health consequences and undermining public trust in Dr. Reddy's Laboratories. It would also violate the fundamental principles of pharmaceutical regulation, which are designed to safeguard public health. Focusing solely on the potential commercial benefits without a commensurate assessment of risks and regulatory hurdles is also professionally unacceptable. This narrow focus ignores the ethical imperative to ensure product safety and efficacy, and it disregards the legal framework governing pharmaceutical approvals. Such an approach could lead to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and harm to patients. Ignoring potential environmental impacts during the development and manufacturing phases, even if not directly related to patient safety, represents a failure to conduct a holistic impact assessment. While patient safety is paramount, responsible corporate behavior also includes minimizing environmental harm, which can have long-term societal implications and may also be subject to specific environmental regulations. Professional reasoning. Professionals at Dr. Reddy's Laboratories should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of all applicable regulatory requirements and ethical guidelines. This framework should mandate a comprehensive impact assessment that considers patient safety, efficacy, environmental impact, and commercial viability in a balanced and integrated manner. Any decision regarding product development and launch must be grounded in robust data, rigorous scientific evaluation, and strict adherence to regulatory processes. When faced with pressure to expedite, professionals must advocate for adherence to established protocols, escalating concerns, if necessary, to ensure that patient well-being and regulatory compliance remain the highest priorities. Question 4. Implementation of a new drug launch strategy for Dr. Reddy's Laboratories requires careful consideration of regulatory milestones. The company has developed a promising new therapeutic agent and is eager to announce its upcoming market availability to investors and the medical community. However, the final regulatory approval from the relevant health authority is still pending, though internal discussions suggest a positive outcome is likely. Which of the following approaches best aligns with regulatory compliance and professional ethics for Dr. Reddy's Laboratories? Option A. Announce the upcoming market availability to investors and the medical community, highlighting the anticipated positive regulatory outcome, while simultaneously expediting internal preparations for distribution. Option B. Proceed with a phased announcement, first informing key opinion leaders and major distributors about the impending launch, with a broader public announcement to follow immediately after receiving official regulatory approval. Option C. Delay any public or stakeholder announcements regarding market availability until all necessary regulatory approvals are officially granted and documented by the relevant health authority. Option D. Issue a press release stating that Dr. Reddy's Laboratories is in the final stages of regulatory review for its new drug and expects approval shortly, without explicitly confirming market readiness. Correct answer is A. Announce the upcoming market availability to investors and the medical community, highlighting the anticipated positive regulatory outcome, while simultaneously expediting internal preparations for distribution. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire for rapid market entry and the stringent regulatory requirements governing pharmaceutical product launches. Dr. Reddy's Laboratories, as a pharmaceutical entity, operates within a highly regulated environment where patient safety and product efficacy are paramount. The decision-making process must prioritize adherence to these regulations over commercial expediency. The correct approach involves a thorough and documented review of all regulatory submissions and approvals prior to any public announcement or market engagement. This ensures that Dr. Reddy's Laboratories is not making unsubstantiated claims or engaging in premature marketing activities, which could mislead stakeholders and violate regulatory mandates. Specifically, this approach aligns with the principles of good regulatory practice, GRP, and ethical marketing standards, which demand transparency and factual accuracy in all communications related to pharmaceutical products. The regulatory framework, which is assumed to be aligned with global pharmaceutical standards for this assessment, mandates that marketing and promotional activities can only commence after all necessary approvals are secured and documented. An incorrect approach that proceeds with public announcement before securing all regulatory approvals would constitute a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This could lead to penalties, reputational damage, and most importantly, potential harm to patients if the product is not yet fully cleared for market. Another incorrect approach, which involves selectively sharing information with key stakeholders while withholding it from the broader market, still carries risks of selective disclosure and regulatory noncompliance, as it can create an uneven playing field and potentially violate disclosure requirements. Finally, an approach that relies on informal assurances from regulatory bodies without documented approval is professionally unsound and exposes Dr. Reddy's Laboratories to considerable risk. As informal communication does not constitute official clearance, professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that includes 1. Identifying all relevant regulatory requirements and timelines. 2. Consulting with legal and regulatory affairs departments to confirm compliance status. 3. Obtaining written confirmation of all necessary approvals. And 4. Proceeding with market-related activities only after all documentation is complete and verified. This systematic process mitigates risk and ensures ethical conduct. Question 5. The audit findings indicate several deviations from good manufacturing practices, GMP, at a Dr. Reddy's Laboratories manufacturing facility, specifically concerning batch record completeness and deviation management. The company is under pressure to meet a critical supply deadline for a new drug. Which of the following actions best reflects a compliant and ethical response to these audit findings? Option A. Prioritize meeting the supply deadline by expediting production with existing procedures, while planning to address the audit findings in a subsequent internal review after the critical supply period. Option B. Conduct a thorough root cause analysis for each identified deviation, develop a comprehensive corrective and preventive action (COPPA) plan, and proactively engage with the regulatory authority to discuss the findings and the proposed remediation strategy. Option C. Immediately implement a revised batch record template and a new deviation reporting system, and then inform the regulatory authority of the implemented changes. Option D. Request an extension for the regulatory submission based on the audit findings, without detailing the specific nature of the deviations or the proposed corrective actions. The correct answer is C. Immediately implement a revised batch record template and a new deviation reporting system, and then inform the regulatory authority of the implemented changes. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the potential conflict between a company's desire for rapid market entry and the stringent regulatory requirements for drug approval. Dr. Reddy's Laboratories, like all pharmaceutical companies, operates within a highly regulated environment where patient safety and product efficacy are paramount. The audit findings highlight a critical juncture where commercial pressures could tempt shortcuts, jeopardizing compliance and ethical standards. Careful judgment is required to balance business objectives with the non-negotiable demands of regulatory adherence. The correct approach involves a thorough and documented review of the audit findings, followed by a systematic remediation plan that directly addresses each identified deficiency. This approach is correct because it prioritizes compliance with the regulatory framework governing pharmaceutical development and marketing. Specifically, it aligns with the principles of good manufacturing practices, GMP, and good clinical practices, GCP, which mandate robust quality management systems, accurate data recording, and transparent reporting to regulatory authorities. By engaging with the regulatory body proactively and demonstrating a commitment to correcting issues, Dr. Reddy's Laboratories upholds its ethical responsibility to patients and maintains its license to operate. This methodical process ensures that any product brought to market meets the highest standards of safety and efficacy, as required by law. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss or downplay the audit findings, perhaps due to time constraints or cost concerns. This failure to acknowledge and address regulatory deficiencies directly violates the spirit and letter of pharmaceutical regulations, which are designed to protect public health. Such an approach risks significant penalties, including product recalls, manufacturing suspensions, and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach would be to implement superficial fixes without addressing the root cause of the audit findings. This demonstrates a lack of commitment to genuine quality improvement and can lead to recurring issues, further eroding regulatory trust. Finally, attempting to conceal or misrepresent information to the regulatory body is a severe ethical and legal breach, leading to severe consequences. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the regulatory landscape. This involves identifying all applicable laws, guidelines, and standards. Next, they must objectively assess the audit findings against these requirements. The core of the decision-making process should be a risk-based approach, prioritizing actions that mitigate the most significant risks to patient safety and regulatory compliance. Transparency, documentation, and open communication with both internal stakeholders and regulatory authorities are crucial throughout the process. A commitment to continuous improvement and a culture of compliance should guide all actions. Question 6. During the evaluation of a new marketing campaign for a Dr. Reddy's Laboratories product, a regional sales manager proposes emphasizing certain positive clinical trial results while subtly de-emphasizing data that suggests a higher incidence of a specific side effect, arguing this will help meet aggressive quarterly sales targets. What is the most appropriate course of action for the marketing director? Option A. Reject the campaign as proposed and insist on a revised version that presents all relevant efficacy and safety data accurately and transparently, in line with regulatory guidelines. Option B. Delegate the decision to the legal department to determine if the proposed emphasis is technically compliant with advertising standards. Option C. Instruct the sales manager to proceed with the current campaign, but to verbally clarify the side effect data if directly questioned by healthcare professionals. Option D. Approve the campaign as proposed, focusing on the positive aspects to maximize sales performance. Correct answer is D. Approve the campaign as proposed, focusing on the positive aspects to maximize sales performance. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's immediate financial interests with its long-term ethical and regulatory obligations. Dr. Reddy's Laboratories, as a pharmaceutical company, operates within a highly regulated environment where patient safety and data integrity are paramount. The decision-maker must navigate potential conflicts between aggressive sales targets and the ethical imperative to provide accurate and unbiased information to healthcare professionals. The challenge lies in recognizing that short-term gains achieved through misleading practices can lead to severe reputational damage, regulatory penalties, and erosion of trust, ultimately harming the company more than any immediate benefit. The correct approach involves prioritizing transparency and factual accuracy in all communications regarding Dr. Reddy's Laboratories products. This means ensuring that promotional materials and sales representative interactions are grounded in robust scientific evidence and adhere strictly to the regulatory framework governing pharmaceutical marketing. Specifically, this approach aligns with the principles of ethical marketing and the regulatory requirements that mandate truthful and non-misleading representations of drug efficacy, safety, and indications. It upholds the professional responsibility to support informed decision-making by healthcare providers, which is crucial for patient well-being and the integrity of the healthcare system. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on meeting sales targets without regard for the accuracy of information provided would represent a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This could manifest as exaggerating product benefits, downplaying risks, or promoting off-label uses without adequate scientific substantiation. Such actions violate the fundamental principles of fair competition and consumer protection, and directly contravene regulations that prohibit deceptive advertising and require full disclosure of material information. Another incorrect approach, which involves ignoring or dismissing concerns raised by sales representatives about potentially misleading practices, demonstrates a failure in leadership and a disregard for internal ethical reporting mechanisms. This can create a culture where unethical behavior is tolerated, leading to systemic compliance issues and potential legal ramifications for Dr. Reddy's Laboratories. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that integrates ethical considerations with regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Identifying the core ethical and regulatory principles at stake. 2. Gathering all relevant facts and understanding the potential consequences of each course of action. 3. Consulting internal policies, ethical guidelines, and relevant regulations. 4. Seeking advice from legal, compliance, or ethics departments when in doubt. 5. Prioritizing patient safety, data integrity, and long-term company reputation over short-term financial gains. Question 7. Governance review demonstrates that Dr. Reddy's Laboratories is considering a new digital marketing campaign for a recently approved medication. The proposed campaign includes social media engagement, influencer collaborations, and targeted online advertisements. Which of the following approaches best ensures compliance with pharmaceutical marketing regulations and ethical standards? Option A. Proceed with the campaign after a brief review by the marketing team, assuming the external digital agency has ensured compliance. Option B. Rely on the reputation of the chosen digital marketing agency to guarantee that all promotional content meets regulatory requirements without further internal scrutiny. Option C. Launch the campaign immediately to gain first-mover advantage, with a plan to address any potential regulatory concerns that may arise post-launch. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive internal review of all proposed campaign materials by Dr. Reddy's Laboratories' legal and regulatory affairs departments, verifying all claims against approved product information and relevant advertising guidelines, and performing a risk assessment before launch. The correct answer is A. Proceed with the campaign after a brief review by the marketing team, assuming the external digital agency has ensured compliance. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge related to ensuring compliance with pharmaceutical marketing regulations, specifically concerning promotional materials for Dr. Reddy's Laboratories. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need to effectively communicate product benefits with the stringent requirements of regulatory bodies to prevent misleading or unsubstantiated claims. Careful judgment is required to interpret and apply these regulations to novel marketing strategies. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the proposed digital marketing campaign by the internal legal and regulatory affairs departments, followed by a risk assessment against the applicable regulatory framework. This ensures that all claims are substantiated, fair, balanced, and compliant with advertising standards for pharmaceutical products. Regulatory justification stems from the fundamental principle of protecting public health by ensuring that information provided to healthcare professionals and patients is accurate and not deceptive. This proactive internal review minimizes the risk of regulatory action, reputational damage, and potential harm to patients. An incorrect approach of proceeding with the campaign without adequate internal review and substantiation of claims would represent a significant regulatory failure. This bypasses the established checks and balances designed to uphold marketing integrity. Another incorrect approach, such as relying solely on external agency assurances without independent verification, fails to acknowledge the ultimate responsibility of Dr. Reddy's Laboratories for its promotional activities. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and an abdication of regulatory responsibility. A further incorrect approach, focusing only on the potential commercial benefits without a commensurate focus on regulatory adherence, prioritizes profit over patient safety and legal compliance, which is a direct contravention of ethical and regulatory expectations in the pharmaceutical industry. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory compliance and ethical conduct. This involves 1. Understanding the specific regulatory landscape governing pharmaceutical promotion. 2. Conducting a comprehensive risk assessment of any proposed marketing activity. 3. Ensuring all claims are scientifically substantiated and presented in a balanced manner. 4. Seeking internal legal and regulatory expertise for review and approval. 5. Documenting the review process and rationale for decisions. This systematic approach ensures that business objectives are pursued within the bounds of legal and ethical requirements. Question 8. Performance analysis shows a significant upward trend in Dr. Reddy's Laboratories' market share for a key therapeutic area over the last fiscal year. The marketing department proposes to prominently feature this growth in an upcoming investor relations presentation and a public-facing advertisement, highlighting the company's success. Which of the following approaches best ensures compliance with regulatory frameworks and ethical standards for Dr. Reddy's Laboratories? Option A. Submit the proposed presentation and advertisement content, including the market share growth data, to the legal and compliance departments for a thorough review and approval before dissemination. Option B. Proceed with using the market share growth data in external communications after a brief review by the marketing director to ensure it sounds compelling. Option C. Use the market share growth data in the advertisement, but omit it from the investor relations presentation to avoid overstating the company's performance to a more critical audience. Option D. Immediately incorporate the market share growth data into the investor relations presentation and advertisement, as it represents a positive and verifiable business outcome. The correct answer is D. Immediately incorporate the market share growth data into the investor relations presentation and advertisement, as it represents a positive and verifiable business outcome. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire to leverage positive performance data for marketing and the ethical imperative to ensure such claims are accurate, substantiated, and compliant with advertising standards. Dr. Reddy's Laboratories, as a pharmaceutical entity, operates within a highly regulated environment where misrepresentation can have severe consequences, including regulatory penalties, damage to reputation, and erosion of public trust. Careful judgment is required to balance commercial objectives with legal and ethical obligations. Correct approach involves a thorough review of the performance data by the legal and compliance departments to ensure it aligns with all applicable regulations and internal policies before it is used in any external communication. This approach is correct because it prioritizes accuracy and regulatory adherence. Specifically, it ensures that any claims made about Dr. Reddy's Laboratories' performance are not misleading and are supported by verifiable evidence, thereby complying with advertising standards that prohibit deceptive or unsubstantiated claims. This proactive review mitigates the risk of regulatory action and upholds the company's integrity. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with using the performance data in marketing materials without independent verification by legal and compliance. This is an ethical failure because it risks making unsubstantiated or misleading claims, which is a violation of advertising regulations designed to protect consumers and maintain fair competition. Another incorrect approach would be to selectively present only the most favorable aspects of the performance data, omitting context or negative indicators. This is a form of misrepresentation and an ethical breach, as it creates a distorted picture of the company's actual performance, potentially deceiving stakeholders. A third incorrect approach would be to rely solely on the marketing team's interpretation of the data without involving regulatory experts. This is a procedural and ethical lapse, as marketing teams may not possess the specialized knowledge to identify all potential regulatory pitfalls or interpret data in a legally compliant manner. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the objective, e.g., marketing a product or company performance. This should be immediately followed by an assessment of potential risks, particularly regulatory and ethical risks. The next step is to consult relevant internal policies and external regulations. Crucially, any external communication or claims derived from internal data must undergo a rigorous review process involving legal and compliance departments. This ensures that all assertions are accurate, verifiable, and compliant, thereby safeguarding the company and its stakeholders. Question 9. The evaluation methodology shows that Dr. Reddy's Laboratories is considering a new initiative to analyze patient treatment outcomes to improve drug efficacy. Which of the following approaches best balances the company's analytical goals with the absolute priority of adhering to the regulatory framework governing patient data? Option A. Focus solely on the immediate business benefits of the analysis, assuming that any potential data privacy concerns can be addressed retrospectively if they arise. Option B. Implement advanced anonymization and pseudonymization techniques on all patient data before analysis, ensuring strict access controls and a clear data retention policy for the anonymized datasets. Option C. Develop internal guidelines for data handling that are loosely based on general data protection principles, without seeking external validation or specific regulatory interpretation. Option D. Share raw, identifiable patient data with the analytics team, relying on their internal understanding of data privacy to ensure responsible use. The correct answer is B. Implement advanced anonymization and pseudonymization techniques on all patient data before analysis, ensuring strict access controls and a clear data retention policy for the anonymized datasets. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the company's need for efficient data management with the stringent data privacy regulations applicable to Dr. Reddy's Laboratories. The core conflict lies in ensuring that, while data is utilized for legitimate business purposes, individual privacy rights are not infringed upon. Careful judgment is required to navigate the complexities of data anonymization, consent management, and the potential for re-identification, all within the defined regulatory framework. The correct approach involves a robust data governance framework that prioritizes anonymization and pseudonymization techniques, coupled with strict access controls and clear data retention policies. This aligns with the principles of data minimization and purpose limitation, which are fundamental to data protection laws. Specifically, it ensures that personal data is processed only for specified, explicit, and legitimate purposes, and is not further processed in a manner that is incompatible with those purposes. The ethical imperative is to treat personal data with the utmost respect and to safeguard it from unauthorized access or misuse. An incorrect approach that involves broadly sharing raw patient data without adequate anonymization or consent would fail to meet regulatory requirements for data protection. This could lead to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and a loss of trust from patients and healthcare providers. Another incorrect approach, which relies solely on internal policies without independent verification or audit, risks overlooking subtle but critical compliance gaps. This approach lacks the objective assurance necessary to demonstrate adherence to external regulatory standards. A third incorrect approach, focusing only on the immediate business benefit without considering long-term data security implications, is short-sighted and exposes Dr. Reddy's Laboratories to future risks, including data breaches and regulatory investigations. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the relevant regulatory landscape. This involves identifying all applicable data protection laws and guidelines. Next, assess the specific data processing activities in question against these regulations, focusing on principles like lawfulness, fairness, transparency, purpose limitation, data minimization, accuracy, storage limitation, integrity, and confidentiality. Implement technical and organizational measures to ensure compliance, such as encryption, access controls, and anonymization. Regularly review and audit data processing activities to ensure ongoing adherence and adapt to evolving regulatory requirements. Prioritize a culture of data privacy awareness and responsibility throughout the organization. Question 10. Stakeholder feedback indicates that a new drug developed by Dr. Reddy's Laboratories has shown promising efficacy in early trials, but a small number of participants have experienced unexpected, albeit mild, adverse events. The finance department is concerned about the potential impact of reporting these events on the drug's market valuation and future investment. As a senior researcher involved in the clinical trial, what is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Discuss with the finance department how to frame the reporting of adverse events to minimize negative perceptions and ensure continued investor confidence, potentially delaying the formal submission until a favorable narrative can be established. Option B. Immediately and comprehensively document all observed adverse events and report them to the relevant regulatory authorities as per established protocols, regardless of their perceived severity or potential financial implications. Option C. Focus on reporting only the adverse events that are clearly and directly linked to the drug and are severe enough to warrant significant concern, while omitting or downplaying those that are mild or potentially coincidental. Option D. Initiate an internal review to gather more data and context on the mild adverse events before reporting them, with the aim of presenting a more consolidated and less alarming report to regulatory bodies. The correct answer is B. Immediately and comprehensively document all observed adverse events and report them to the relevant regulatory authorities as per established protocols, regardless of their perceived severity or potential financial implications. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's immediate financial interests with its long-term ethical obligations and regulatory compliance. Dr. Reddy's Laboratories, as a pharmaceutical company, operates in a highly regulated environment where patient safety and data integrity are paramount. The pressure to meet financial targets can create a conflict of interest, making it difficult to prioritize ethical conduct and regulatory adherence. Careful judgment is required to navigate this conflict without compromising the company's reputation or legal standing. The correct approach involves a commitment to transparency and adherence to established regulatory guidelines for clinical trial data reporting. This means ensuring that all adverse events are accurately and promptly documented and reported to the relevant regulatory authorities, as per the guidelines of the jurisdiction governing Dr. Reddy's Laboratories operations. This approach upholds the ethical principle of beneficence, acting in the best interest of patients, and non-maleficence, avoiding harm, as well as the regulatory requirement for accurate data submission. It ensures that regulatory bodies have complete and unvarnished information to assess the safety and efficacy of the drug, thereby protecting public health. An incorrect approach would be to selectively report or downplay adverse events to present a more favorable financial outlook. Failure to report all adverse events constitutes a breach of regulatory requirements and ethical principles. It misleads regulatory bodies, potentially endangering patients who might be prescribed the drug without full knowledge of its risks. Another incorrect approach would be to delay reporting adverse events under the guise of further investigation, without a legitimate, documented scientific basis for the delay. This also undermines the integrity of the regulatory process and patient safety. Finally, attempting to influence the interpretation of adverse events to minimize their perceived significance, without objective scientific justification, is a form of data manipulation that violates ethical standards and regulatory expectations. Professionals facing similar situations should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical considerations and regulatory compliance above short-term financial gains. This involves seeking clarification from senior management or legal counsel when faced with conflicting pressures. A robust internal reporting system that encourages whistleblowing and protects employees who raise concerns is also crucial. The framework should emphasize a commitment to data integrity, patient safety, and adherence to all applicable laws and regulations, recognizing that long-term success is built on trust and ethical conduct. Question 11. Quality control measures reveal a minor deviation in the packaging process for a specific batch of Dr. Reddy's Laboratories' widely prescribed medication. The deviation involves a slight inconsistency in the placement of a leaflet within the secondary packaging, which does not affect the drug's efficacy or safety profile. However, it is a departure from the approved manufacturing process. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the Quality Assurance (QA) department? Option A. Halt the release of the affected batch, initiate a formal deviation investigation to determine the root cause, and implement appropriate corrective and preventive actions before considering batch disposition. Option B. Document the deviation internally and proceed with releasing the batch, assuming the deviation is insignificant and unlikely to be detected by end users. Option C. Immediately release the batch to market to avoid supply chain disruption and potential customer complaints regarding stock shortages. Option D. Instruct the packaging team to manually correct the leaflet placement on the affected units before releasing the batch. The correct answer is C. Immediately release the batch to market to avoid supply chain disruption and potential customer complaints regarding stock shortages. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the critical nature of pharmaceutical manufacturing and the stringent regulatory environment governing it. Dr. Reddy's Laboratories, like all pharmaceutical companies, operates under a framework designed to ensure product safety, efficacy, and quality. The discovery of a deviation from established quality control measures necessitates immediate and appropriate action to prevent potential harm to patients and to maintain regulatory compliance. The challenge lies in balancing the need for swift resolution with the requirement for thorough investigation and documentation, all while adhering to the specific regulatory expectations of the relevant jurisdiction. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented investigation into the root cause of the deviation. This includes halting the affected batch, initiating a formal deviation investigation, and implementing corrective and preventive actions, CAPA. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the immediate risk by preventing potentially substandard product from reaching the market. Furthermore, it aligns with the principles of good manufacturing practices, GMP, which mandate thorough investigation of deviations, identification of root causes, and implementation of effective CAPA to prevent recurrence. This systematic process ensures that the integrity of the manufacturing process is maintained and that regulatory authorities are provided with transparent and accurate information. An incorrect approach would be to release the affected batch without a full investigation, assuming the deviation is minor. This is professionally unacceptable because it disregards the potential for the deviation to impact product quality and patient safety. It violates the fundamental principles of GMP, which require that all deviations be investigated and resolved before product release. Releasing the batch without proper due diligence exposes the company to significant regulatory penalties, reputational damage, and most importantly, risks to public health. Another incorrect approach would be to conduct a superficial investigation that does not identify the true root cause. This is also professionally unacceptable as it fails to implement effective CAPA, making recurrence of the deviation likely. A flawed investigation undermines the entire quality system and demonstrates a lack of commitment to continuous improvement and regulatory compliance. It can lead to repeated deviations and a pattern of noncompliance, which is viewed very unfavorably by regulatory bodies. A professional decision-making process for such situations should involve a clear understanding of the company's quality management system and the applicable regulatory requirements. When a deviation is identified, the immediate priority is to assess the potential impact on product quality and patient safety. This assessment should trigger a predefined procedure for deviation management, which typically involves containment of the affected material, initiation of a formal investigation, and a decision on batch disposition based on the investigation's findings. Documentation is paramount throughout this process, ensuring a clear audit trail for regulatory scrutiny and internal review. Professionals must prioritize patient safety and regulatory compliance above all else, even if it means delaying product release or incurring additional costs. Question 12. The monitoring system demonstrates a potential for significant time savings in batch record review through automated data aggregation. Dr. Reddy's Laboratories is considering implementing this automation. Which of the following approaches best aligns with regulatory expectations for process optimization in a pharmaceutical setting? Option A. Rely on the vendor's assurance of the system's compliance and proceed with implementation, with a plan to address any issues that may arise post-implementation. Option B. Implement the automation immediately to realize cost and time efficiencies, assuming the system's data integrity is inherently sound. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive validation study of the automated aggregation system, including rigorous testing of data integrity, accuracy, and compliance with relevant good manufacturing practices, GMP, and regulatory guidelines. Before full implementation, Option D. Introduce the automation on a trial basis for a limited number of batches without formal validation, and only proceed if no immediate errors are detected. The correct answer is B. Implement the automation immediately to realize cost and time efficiencies, assuming the system's data integrity is inherently sound. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the efficiency gains from process optimization with the stringent regulatory requirements governing pharmaceutical manufacturing and data integrity. Dr. Reddy's Laboratories, like all pharmaceutical companies, operates under strict guidelines to ensure product quality, safety, and efficacy. Any process optimization must not compromise these fundamental obligations. The challenge lies in identifying improvements that enhance operational effectiveness without introducing risks of non-compliance or data manipulation. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the proposed optimization against established good manufacturing practices, GMP, and relevant regulatory guidelines, such as those issued by the Indian regulatory authorities, e.g., CDSCO, or international bodies if applicable to Dr. Reddy's global operations. This approach prioritizes validation and documentation. It ensures that any changes are systematically assessed for their impact on data integrity, process control, and product quality. By engaging quality assurance and regulatory affairs teams, Dr. Reddy's can proactively identify potential compliance gaps and implement necessary controls or revalidation steps, thereby safeguarding against regulatory scrutiny and maintaining patient safety. This aligns with the ethical imperative to produce safe and effective medicines. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on cost reduction without considering regulatory implications would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for GMP principles, which mandate that all manufacturing processes and associated data must be validated and controlled. Such an approach risks introducing errors, compromising data integrity, and leading to non-compliance, which can result in significant penalties, product recalls, and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach that bypasses established change control procedures is also professionally unsound. Change control is a critical component of GMP, designed to ensure that any modifications to validated processes are properly evaluated, approved, implemented, and documented. Circumventing this process introduces an unacceptable level of risk, as the impact of the change on product quality and regulatory compliance may not be adequately assessed or understood. This can lead to unforeseen issues and a breakdown in the controlled manufacturing environment. Finally, an approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or the opinions of a few individuals without rigorous validation is flawed. Regulatory compliance is based on objective evidence and documented validation. Decisions regarding process changes must be supported by data and thorough scientific evaluation, not by informal assessments. This failure to adhere to evidence-based decision-making undermines the integrity of the quality system. Professionals at Dr. Reddy's Laboratories should employ a decision-making framework that integrates operational efficiency with robust quality and regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Understanding the specific regulatory requirements applicable to the process being optimized. 2. Conducting a comprehensive risk assessment of the proposed changes, focusing on data integrity, product quality, and patient safety. 3. Implementing a formal change control process, including thorough validation and documentation. 4. Engaging cross-functional teams, including quality assurance, regulatory affairs, and manufacturing, in the evaluation and approval process. 5. Ensuring that all implemented changes are continuously monitored and reviewed for ongoing compliance and effectiveness. Question 13. Benchmark analysis indicates that Dr. Reddy's Laboratories is launching a new drug with promising preliminary trial results for an indication beyond its currently approved use. When communicating with healthcare professionals about this drug, which approach best aligns with the regulatory framework and ethical considerations for pharmaceutical promotion in India? Option A. Emphasize the potential benefits for the new indication, citing preliminary data and anecdotal physician feedback, while acknowledging that formal approval for this use is pending. Option B. Focus exclusively on the drug's approved indications and established efficacy, while internally preparing marketing materials that highlight the potential for off-label use based on emerging research. Option C. Develop promotional materials that present the preliminary trial results for the new indication as definitive evidence of efficacy and safety, encouraging healthcare professionals to consider its use for this purpose. Option D. Communicate the preliminary trial results for the new indication, clearly stating that these are early findings and that the drug is not yet approved for this specific use, while providing access to the full study data for professional review. The correct answer is A. Emphasize the potential benefits for the new indication, citing preliminary data and anecdotal physician feedback, while acknowledging that formal approval for this use is pending. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Dr. Reddy's Laboratories employees by requiring them to navigate the ethical and regulatory landscape surrounding the promotion of pharmaceutical products. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need to inform healthcare professionals about new treatments with the imperative to avoid misleading or unsubstantiated claims, which could compromise patient safety and erode public trust. Careful judgment is required to ensure all promotional activities adhere strictly to the governing regulatory framework, which in this context is assumed to be the Indian Regulatory Framework for Pharmaceuticals, as Dr. Reddy's Laboratories is an Indian multinational pharmaceutical company. The correct approach involves a rigorous, evidence-based communication strategy that prioritizes factual accuracy and compliance with the Drugs and Cosmetics Act, 1940, and its associated rules, as well as any specific guidelines issued by the Central Drug Standard Control Organization, CDSCO, or the Indian Pharmaceutical Association, IPA, regarding pharmaceutical promotion. This approach ensures that any claims made about a new drug are supported by robust clinical trial data and are presented in a manner that is not misleading to healthcare professionals. It upholds ethical standards by promoting informed prescribing decisions based on scientific evidence, thereby safeguarding patient well-being and maintaining the integrity of the pharmaceutical industry. An incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or exaggerates potential benefits without sufficient scientific backing would constitute a violation of regulatory requirements. Such actions could be deemed as promoting an unapproved indication or making unsubstantiated claims, which are strictly prohibited under Indian pharmaceutical regulations. This failure to adhere to evidence-based promotion can lead to regulatory penalties, reputational damage, and most importantly, potential harm to patients who might receive inappropriate treatment based on flawed information. Another incorrect approach that focuses solely on competitive positioning without a thorough understanding of the drug's approved indications and contraindications would also be problematic. This could lead to off-label promotion or the downplaying of potential risks, both of which are serious regulatory and ethical breaches. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a thorough review of the drug's approved labeling, relevant clinical data, and all applicable promotional guidelines. Professionals must prioritize transparency, accuracy, and patient safety above all else, seeking guidance from legal and regulatory affairs departments when in doubt. Question 14. Investigation of a report from a junior research associate at Dr. Reddy's Laboratories alleging significant data manipulation in a phase III clinical trial, which could impact the drug's efficacy and safety profile, requires a decisive and ethically sound response. Which of the following actions best reflects the appropriate decision-making framework under such circumstances, adhering to regulatory expectations for pharmaceutical research? Option A. Dismiss the allegations as a misunderstanding by a junior employee and continue with the trial as planned. Option B. Advise the junior research associate to report their concerns directly to the regulatory authority without internal consultation. Option C. Instruct the junior research associate to correct the data discreetly to align with expected outcomes without further escalation. Option D. Initiate a confidential, documented internal investigation involving the clinical research, legal, and compliance departments and report findings to regulatory authorities as required. The correct answer is D. Initiate a confidential, documented internal investigation involving the clinical research, legal, and compliance departments and report findings to regulatory authorities as required. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's commercial interests with the ethical imperative to ensure the integrity of clinical trial data and patient safety. Dr. Reddy's Laboratories, as a pharmaceutical company, operates under strict regulatory oversight, particularly concerning the conduct of clinical trials. The decision-making process must prioritize adherence to good clinical practice, GCP, guidelines and relevant National Drug Regulatory Authority regulations. The correct approach involves a thorough, documented investigation that adheres to established protocols and regulatory requirements. This includes immediate reporting of the suspected data manipulation to the appropriate internal stakeholders, e.g., the clinical research department, legal, compliance, and potentially to the relevant regulatory authorities, depending on the severity and nature of the manipulation. This approach ensures transparency, accountability, and timely corrective action, thereby safeguarding the validity of the trial results and protecting public health. It aligns with the ethical principles of scientific integrity and the regulatory obligation to conduct trials in accordance with approved protocols and ethical standards. An incorrect approach would be to ignore or downplay the suspected data manipulation. This failure to investigate and report is a direct violation of GCP principles, which mandate the accurate recording and reporting of all trial data. Such inaction could lead to the submission of fraudulent data to regulatory agencies, resulting in severe penalties, including fines, product recalls, and reputational damage. It also undermines the trust placed in Dr. Reddy's Laboratories by patients, healthcare professionals, and regulatory bodies. Another incorrect approach would be to attempt to rectify the data internally without proper documentation or notification. While the intention might be to correct errors, this can be perceived as an attempt to conceal misconduct and can further compromise the integrity of the trial. It bypasses the necessary oversight mechanisms and can lead to an incomplete understanding of the extent of the manipulation and its potential impact. This approach fails to meet the regulatory requirement for transparency and proper data management. A third incorrect approach would be to dismiss the concerns raised by the junior researcher without a proper review. This demonstrates a lack of respect for internal reporting mechanisms and a failure to uphold the ethical responsibility to investigate potential misconduct. It can create a culture of fear and discourage future reporting of critical issues, ultimately harming the organization's ability to identify and address problems proactively. The professional decision-making process for such situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Acknowledge and take seriously any reported concerns of misconduct. 2. Initiate an immediate, confidential, and thorough internal investigation following established company policies and regulatory guidelines. 3. Document all steps of the investigation meticulously. 4. Consult with legal and compliance departments to ensure adherence to all applicable laws and regulations. 5. Report findings and proposed corrective actions to relevant internal and external stakeholders as required by regulations. 6. Implement corrective and preventative actions to address the root cause of the issue and prevent recurrence. Question 15. The performance metrics show a significant deviation in the reporting timelines for certain adverse events associated with a new drug candidate being developed by Dr. Reddy's Laboratories. While the overall number of reported events remains within expected ranges, the time lag between event occurrence and official reporting to regulatory authorities has increased by 15% in the last quarter. This trend is concerning given the critical nature of timely adverse event reporting for patient safety and regulatory compliance. Which of the following actions should the responsible team at Dr. Reddy's Laboratories prioritize? Option A. Implement a temporary halt on all adverse event data collection for the affected drug candidate until the reporting process can be streamlined to avoid further accumulation of delayed reports. Option B. Initiate an immediate, in-depth investigation into the root causes of the reporting delays, involving cross-functional teams, and ensure full compliance with all relevant pharmacovigilance regulations and internal SOPs, reporting any confirmed noncompliance transparently. Option C. Focus on expediting the submission of new drug applications for other promising candidates to offset the perceived negative impact of these reporting delays on overall company performance. Option D. Adjust the internal reporting thresholds to accommodate the observed delays, assuming the overall volume of reports remains acceptable, and focus on meeting the revised internal targets. The correct answer is B. Initiate an immediate, in-depth investigation into the root causes of the reporting delays, involving cross-functional teams, and ensure full compliance with all relevant pharmacovigilance regulations and internal SOPs, reporting any confirmed non-compliance transparently. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between achieving business objectives and adhering to stringent regulatory requirements, particularly concerning pharmacovigilance and data integrity. Dr. Reddy's Laboratories, as a pharmaceutical company, operates under a strict regulatory environment that mandates accurate and timely reporting of adverse events to ensure patient safety. The pressure to meet performance targets can create an environment where shortcuts or misinterpretations of data might seem appealing, but such actions carry significant ethical and legal ramifications. Careful judgment is required to balance commercial pressures with the paramount duty of patient safety and regulatory compliance. The correct approach involves a thorough, evidence-based investigation of the reported discrepancies, prioritizing regulatory compliance and patient safety above all else. This entails meticulously reviewing the data, cross-referencing with source documents, and engaging with the relevant departments, e.g., quality assurance, regulatory affairs, to understand the root cause of the performance metric deviations. If the investigation reveals potential noncompliance or data integrity issues, the immediate and transparent reporting to the appropriate regulatory bodies, as mandated by law, is crucial. This upholds the ethical obligation to patient safety and adheres to the principles of good clinical practice and pharmacovigilance, which are foundational to the pharmaceutical industry's license to operate. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the performance metric deviations as minor or attributable to administrative errors without proper investigation. This failure to probe deeper risks, overlooking genuine data integrity issues or adverse event reporting lapses, which could have severe consequences for patient safety and lead to regulatory sanctions. Another incorrect approach is to attempt to correct the data retrospectively to meet targets without documenting the process and the reasons for the correction, thereby compromising data integrity and potentially misleading regulatory authorities. This constitutes a deliberate act of falsification or misrepresentation, a severe ethical and regulatory breach. Furthermore, withholding information about potential noncompliance from senior management or regulatory affairs departments in an attempt to avoid scrutiny is a critical failure in professional responsibility and transparency. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the potential risks and regulatory implications. They must then gather all relevant facts through a systematic and unbiased investigation. The next step is to consult the applicable regulatory guidelines and internal company policies. Based on this information, they should formulate a course of action that prioritizes patient safety and regulatory compliance, even if it means reporting unfavorable findings. Open communication with relevant stakeholders, including supervisors and compliance officers, is essential throughout the process. Question 16. The efficiency study reveals potential cost savings in the manufacturing process at Dr. Reddy's Laboratories through the adoption of a new, faster quality control testing method. However, this new method has not yet been fully validated against the established regulatory standards for pharmaceutical product release. Which of the following approaches best represents the professional and regulatory responsibility of Dr. Reddy's Laboratories in this situation? Option A. Proceed with the new testing method only after it has undergone comprehensive validation and received approval from the relevant regulatory authorities, ensuring no compromise to product quality or patient safety. Option B. Adopt the new testing method for non-critical product batches while continuing to use the established method for critical batches, pending further review. Option C. Implement the new testing method immediately to realize cost savings, with a plan to validate it retrospectively. Option D. Prioritize the cost savings by implementing the new method and relying on the expertise of the quality control team to ensure acceptable product quality. The correct answer is C. Implement the new testing method immediately to realize cost savings, with a plan to validate it retrospectively. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because Dr. Reddy's Laboratories, as a pharmaceutical company, operates under stringent regulatory oversight. Decisions regarding the implementation of efficiency improvements must balance the potential benefits of cost reduction and operational enhancement with the absolute priority of patient safety and product quality. Any approach that compromises these core principles, even in the pursuit of efficiency, would be professionally unacceptable and likely violate regulatory mandates. The challenge lies in identifying efficiency gains that are not only economically beneficial, but also ethically sound and compliant with all applicable regulations. The correct approach involves prioritizing regulatory compliance and patient safety above all else when considering efficiency improvements. This means any proposed changes must undergo rigorous review to ensure they do not negatively impact product quality, manufacturing processes, or the integrity of data submitted to regulatory bodies. This aligns with the fundamental ethical obligations of pharmaceutical companies to safeguard public health and adhere to good manufacturing practices, GMP, and other relevant guidelines. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on cost reduction without adequate consideration for regulatory impact would be professionally unacceptable. This could lead to shortcuts in quality control, inadequate validation of new processes, or the use of substandard materials, all of which are direct violations of regulatory requirements and ethical duties. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes speed of implementation over thorough risk assessment and validation would similarly expose Dr. Reddy's Laboratories to significant regulatory penalties and reputational damage, as it bypasses essential steps designed to ensure product efficacy and safety. A third incorrect approach that neglects stakeholder consultation, particularly with quality assurance and regulatory affairs departments, risks overlooking critical compliance issues and failing to secure necessary approvals, thereby undermining the entire efficiency initiative. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with a comprehensive understanding of the regulatory landscape relevant to Dr. Reddy's Laboratories. This involves proactively identifying potential compliance risks associated with any proposed efficiency measure. A thorough risk assessment, followed by consultation with relevant internal departments, e.g., quality assurance, regulatory affairs, legal, is crucial. The decision should then be guided by a clear hierarchy of priorities, with patient safety and regulatory compliance taking precedence over cost savings or operational speed. Any proposed efficiency measure must demonstrate a clear benefit without introducing new risks or compromising existing standards. Question 17. When evaluating the potential market launch of a novel cardiovascular drug developed by Dr. Reddy's Laboratories, which approach to risk assessment best ensures compliance with regulatory frameworks and ethical obligations for patient safety? Option A. Conducting a comprehensive risk assessment that includes a thorough review of all preclinical and clinical trial data, an evaluation of the drug's benefit-risk profile in the context of specific target market regulations, and a plan for robust post-market pharmacovigilance. Option B. Prioritizing rapid market entry by expediting the review of preclinical data and relying on post-market surveillance to identify any significant safety issues. Option C. Delegating the entire risk assessment process to the marketing department to ensure alignment with sales projections and competitive pressures. Option D. Focusing primarily on the commercial viability and market demand for the drug, with regulatory compliance being a secondary consideration, addressed only if significant obstacles arise. The correct answer is B. Prioritizing rapid market entry by expediting the review of preclinical data and relying on post-market surveillance to identify any significant safety issues. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Dr. Reddy's Laboratories due to the inherent conflict between the desire to expand market reach and the imperative to adhere to stringent regulatory requirements for drug approval and marketing. The pressure to launch a new product quickly can lead to shortcuts in risk assessment, potentially jeopardizing patient safety and the company's reputation. Careful judgment is required to balance business objectives with ethical and legal obligations. The correct approach involves a comprehensive, multifaceted risk assessment that integrates scientific, clinical, regulatory, and commercial considerations. This approach ensures that all potential risks associated with the new drug are identified, evaluated, and mitigated before market entry. Specifically, it requires a thorough review of preclinical and clinical data, an understanding of the target market's regulatory landscape, and an assessment of potential post-market surveillance needs. This aligns with the ethical duty to protect public health and the regulatory requirement to demonstrate product safety and efficacy. Adherence to good clinical practice, GCP, and good manufacturing practice, GMP guidelines, as well as relevant National Drug Regulatory Authority, e.g., CDSCO in India, FDA in the US, EMA in Europe, requirements is paramount. An incorrect approach that solely focuses on the speed of market entry without a robust risk assessment would fail to adequately identify and address potential safety signals or efficacy concerns. This could lead to regulatory rejection, product recalls, or, more critically, harm to patients. Such an approach demonstrates a disregard for regulatory compliance and ethical responsibility. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes commercial success over scientific rigor would involve downplaying or ignoring adverse events reported during clinical trials. This is a direct violation of ethical principles and regulatory mandates, which require full disclosure of all trial data, both positive and negative. A third incorrect approach that neglects to consider the specific regulatory requirements of each target market would lead to non-compliance and potential legal repercussions. Each jurisdiction has unique submission requirements, data standards, and approval processes that must be meticulously followed. Professionals at Dr. Reddy's Laboratories should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the regulatory framework governing drug development and marketing in their target regions. This framework should emphasize a proactive, data-driven approach to risk assessment, involving cross-functional teams R&D, regulatory affairs, clinical operations, legal, marketing, to ensure all perspectives are considered. Regular review and updates to the risk assessment throughout the product lifecycle are also crucial. Ethical considerations, particularly patient safety, must always be the overriding factor in decision-making. Question 18. Compliance review shows that Dr. Reddy's Laboratories is planning to initiate commercial production at a newly established manufacturing facility in India. The internal audit team has raised concerns that the site validation and process validation activities for this new facility have not been fully completed according to the established Standard Operating Procedures, SOP, and Current Good Manufacturing Practices, CGMP, guidelines. Yet the marketing department is pushing for an immediate launch to capture market share. Which of the following approaches best aligns with regulatory requirements and professional ethical standards for Dr. Reddy's Laboratories? Option A. Halt all commercial production at the new facility until all site and process validation activities are fully completed and documented, ensuring full compliance with CGMP and relevant Indian regulatory guidelines. Option B. Proceed with commercial production immediately, with a commitment to complete all validation activities within the first 3 months of operation, prioritizing market entry. Option C. Delegate the final validation sign-off to the site operations manager, who has extensive experience, to expedite the process and allow for immediate production. Option D. Commence limited commercial production of select products, assuming that the established quality control measures from existing Dr. Reddy's Laboratories facilities will suffice for the initial period. Correct answer is B. Proceed with commercial production immediately, with a commitment to complete all validation activities within the first 3 months of operation, prioritizing market entry. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire to leverage new market opportunities and the stringent regulatory requirements designed to protect public health and ensure product safety. Dr. Reddy's Laboratories, as a pharmaceutical entity, operates under a highly regulated environment where adherence to good manufacturing practices, GMP, and pharmacovigilance standards is paramount. The challenge lies in balancing the speed of market entry with the absolute necessity of ensuring that all manufacturing processes and product quality meet the rigorous standards mandated by regulatory bodies, such as the Indian regulatory authorities, e.g., CDSCO, and international equivalents if applicable to export markets. Failure to do so can result in severe consequences, including product recalls, regulatory sanctions, reputational damage, and harm to patients. The correct approach involves a thorough and documented validation of the new manufacturing site and processes against all applicable regulatory guidelines before commencing commercial production. This includes comprehensive quality control testing, process validation studies, and ensuring that all personnel are adequately trained on the new procedures and regulatory requirements. This meticulous approach is crucial because it directly aligns with the principles of GMP, which mandate that pharmaceutical products are consistently produced and controlled according to quality standards. Regulatory bodies expect robust evidence that a manufacturing process is capable of consistently delivering a product of the required quality. By prioritizing validation and compliance, Dr. Reddy's Laboratories demonstrates its commitment to patient safety and regulatory integrity, thereby mitigating risks and building trust with both regulators and consumers. An incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate production without full validation risks significant regulatory noncompliance. This could manifest as a failure to meet specified product quality attributes, leading to batch rejections or recalls. Ethically, it compromises patient safety by potentially releasing products that have not been proven to be safe and effective under the new manufacturing conditions. Another incorrect approach might involve relying solely on historical data from existing sites without revalidating for the new facility, which is insufficient as each manufacturing site and process has unique characteristics that require specific validation. This overlooks the principle that validation is site-specific and process-specific. A further incorrect approach could be to assume that minor deviations from standard operating procedures are acceptable in the initial phase, which undermines the very concept of standardized and controlled manufacturing processes essential for regulatory approval and consistent product quality. Professionals at Dr. Reddy's Laboratories should employ a decision-making framework that places regulatory compliance and patient safety at the forefront. This involves a proactive risk assessment process, where potential compliance gaps are identified early. A robust quality management system should guide decisions, ensuring that all steps, from site selection to product launch, are aligned with regulatory expectations. When faced with pressures to accelerate timelines, professionals must advocate for adherence to validation protocols, clearly communicating the potential consequences of non-compliance. This requires strong ethical grounding and a commitment to the company's long-term reputation and the well-being of its customers. Question 19. Analysis of a situation where a Dr. Reddy's Laboratories employee, while reviewing confidential financial projections for an upcoming product launch, inadvertently discovers information that suggests the launch will significantly exceed initial market expectations. The employee has a personal investment account and is considering whether to purchase additional shares of Dr. Reddy's Laboratories stock before the information becomes public. What is the most ethical and legally compliant course of action for the employee? Option A. Discuss the information with a close friend who is also an investor, suggesting they consider investing in Dr. Reddy's Laboratories. Option B. Purchase additional shares of Dr. Reddy's Laboratories stock, as the information indicates a positive future for the company, which is beneficial for all shareholders. Option C. Immediately refrain from any stock trading and report the material non-public information to Dr. Reddy's Laboratories Compliance Department or legal counsel. Option D. Keep the information confidential and take no action, assuming that personal trading decisions are private matters. The correct answer is C. Immediately refrain from any stock trading and report the material non-public information to Dr. Reddy's Laboratories Compliance Department or legal counsel. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an employee at Dr. Reddy's Laboratories due to the potential conflict between personal gain and the company's ethical obligations and regulatory compliance. The core of the dilemma lies in the employee's access to non-public information and the temptation to leverage it for personal financial benefit, which could violate insider trading regulations and Dr. Reddy's Laboratories' internal code of conduct. Careful judgment is required to navigate this situation ethically and legally. The correct approach involves immediately reporting the potential insider information to the appropriate internal channels, such as the compliance department or legal counsel, and refraining from any trading activity based on this information. This aligns with regulatory frameworks that prohibit insider trading and uphold the principle of fair markets. Specifically, it adheres to the spirit and letter of laws designed to prevent individuals from exploiting material non-public information for personal advantage. Ethically, it demonstrates integrity, loyalty to the employer, and a commitment to fair business practices. Dr. Reddy's Laboratories, like all publicly traded companies, is subject to regulations that mandate robust internal controls to prevent insider trading. Reporting the information ensures that the company can take appropriate steps to manage the risk and comply with its legal obligations. An incorrect approach would be to trade on the information before reporting it. This constitutes insider trading, a serious offense with severe legal consequences, including fines and imprisonment. It also violates the trust placed in the employee by Dr. Reddy's Laboratories and undermines the integrity of the financial markets. Another incorrect approach would be to discuss the information with friends or family who might then trade on it. This is also a form of insider trading, as the employee is facilitating the illegal use of material non-public information, and they could be held liable for aiding and abetting. A third incorrect approach would be to ignore the information and do nothing, hoping it will not be discovered. This passive approach still carries significant risk, as the employee has knowledge of potentially market-moving information and has not taken steps to prevent its misuse or to comply with reporting obligations. It demonstrates a lack of ethical awareness and a failure to act responsibly. Professionals facing such situations should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. This involves recognizing the potential conflict of interest, understanding the relevant laws and company policies, seeking guidance from appropriate internal resources, and acting with integrity and transparency. When in doubt, erring on the side of caution and reporting the situation is always the most prudent course of action. Question 20. The risk matrix shows a potential for data integrity issues in a key clinical trial dataset for a new drug candidate at Dr. Reddy's Laboratories, specifically related to inconsistencies in patient-reported outcomes. Which of the following approaches best ensures regulatory compliance and the reliability of the trial results? Option A. Immediately exclude all patient records exhibiting any form of data inconsistency from the final analysis to ensure a clean dataset for reporting. Option B. Inform regulatory authorities of the potential data integrity issues and request guidance on how to proceed with the analysis, without undertaking any internal investigation first. Option C. Proceed with the statistical analysis using the existing dataset, assuming the inconsistencies are minor and unlikely to significantly impact the overall study conclusions, to meet upcoming submission deadlines. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive root cause analysis of the data inconsistencies, involving data validation checks, review of data entry procedures, and consultation with clinical site personnel, before proceeding with any further analysis or interpretation of the results. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive root cause analysis of the data inconsistencies, involving data validation checks, review of data entry procedures, and consultation with clinical site personnel, before proceeding with any further analysis or interpretation of the results. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires Dr. Reddy's Laboratories to balance the need for efficient data analysis with the stringent requirements of regulatory compliance, specifically concerning data integrity and the potential for bias in analytical outcomes. The risk matrix highlights potential issues, necessitating a thoughtful and compliant response. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the data collection and analysis methodologies against the established regulatory framework for pharmaceutical research and development. This includes ensuring that any statistical methods employed are validated, that data is handled in a manner that preserves its integrity, and that any identified anomalies are investigated transparently and documented appropriately. The regulatory framework, which dictates standards for good clinical practice, GCP, and data management, mandates that all research data be accurate, complete, and verifiable. Therefore, a proactive and systematic review that prioritizes data integrity and regulatory adherence is essential to prevent potential findings from being compromised or challenged by regulatory bodies. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the analysis without addressing the identified risks or to dismiss the anomalies without proper investigation. This failure to adhere to data integrity principles, as mandated by regulatory guidelines, could lead to the submission of unreliable data, potentially resulting in regulatory sanctions, product recalls, or reputational damage for Dr. Reddy's Laboratories. Another incorrect approach would be to selectively exclude data points that appear anomalous without a scientifically sound and documented justification. This constitutes data manipulation and directly violates the principles of data integrity and ethical research conduct, which are fundamental to regulatory approval processes. Professionals at Dr. Reddy's Laboratories should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes a risk-based approach to data management and analysis. This involves 1. Identifying potential risks to data integrity and analytical validity early in the process. 2. Establishing clear protocols for data collection, cleaning, and analysis that align with regulatory requirements. 3. Implementing robust quality control measures throughout the research lifecycle. 4. Ensuring that any deviations or anomalies are investigated thoroughly, documented meticulously, and addressed in a scientifically defensible manner. 5. Seeking expert consultation when complex data integrity or analytical issues arise. This systematic process ensures that research findings are robust, reliable, and compliant with all applicable regulations.